The atmosphere in the courtroom had always been intense, but today carried a weight that was almost suffocating. It was as if the very walls were bracing for what was to come. Everyone could feel that something explosive was imminent, though. No one anticipated the bombshell the prosecution was about to drop. A hushed stillness swept across the gallery as the prosecutor stepped forward, holding a small flash drive as if it were a live detonator. She paused, locked eyes with the jury, and then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution requests permission to submit newly obtained audio evidence recovered from a secure storage device seized during a federal raid on Mr. Combs's property in Miami." The judge leaned in, cautious. "What is the source?" "Encrypted recordings from an off-grid backup. This particular file captures a private phone conversation between the defendant and Bishop TD Jakes. The discussion took place on August 9th, 2022, around 6 months before federal investigations commenced." Gasps rippled through the room. TD Jakes, a voice that had inspired millions, a spiritual leader who had shared stages with presidents and spoken to believers across the spectrum. The judge gave a solemn nod. "Proceed." As the lights dimmed and the audio loaded, the shift in tone was immediate. This wasn't casual. The exchange was low, deliberate, and the identities of the speakers were unmistakable. "Diddy, things are escalating. I need your covering. They're sniffing around TD Jakes. You built this with layers. They won't find the path. Stay aligned. Keep your circle tight. What about the others? If they fold, they fold. The weak always do. Just make sure the footage stays buried." The air was sucked out of the courtroom. Before diving deeper into this intense footage, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss updates like this. Let's continue. "Diddy, what about the press? Rumors are flying. Even JLO's team is asking questions again. Let them ask. You owe them no full truths. Just enough to distract. Shift the story. Give them an exclusive. Silence, my brother, is a form of wisdom. And if the victims speak, then remind them who they're dealing with. Not everyone rises. Some fade away. That's balance." Cries erupted. From the gallery, a woman stifled a sob, and a juror leaned in, visibly shaken. TD Jakes' voice, once heard in moments of grace, now echoed with calculated control. The audio ended, lights returned, but the room stayed frozen. Diddy sat motionless, his face unreadable. His legal team stared blankly ahead, clearly absorbing the gravity of what had just unfolded. The prosecutor stepped forward. "What you heard isn't just proof of collusion. It is a disturbing conversation between a man accused of surveillance, coercion, and abuse in a spiritual figure advising him to hold power through manipulation and by suppressing truth." She let the weight of her words linger. "The weak ones always fold." That's what he said about the victims, those who suffered. "Behind closed doors, this is not just a scandal," she added. "This is betrayal not just of people, but of faith itself." The judge exhaled and murmured, "We'll break for a brief recess," but no one moved, no sound followed, because no one knew which was worse, what Diddy had done, or who had helped him keep it hidden. When the courtroom resumed, the energy had changed. It no longer felt like a trial, felt like a sacred space defiled. TD Jakes' voice still hung in the air, strategic, methodical, wrapped in protective language. Though absent, he was now undeniably present beside Diddy. The prosecutor returned, now holding a printed transcript time-stamped, federally watermarked. "Your Honor," she began, "we are submitting the full written transcript of the Diddy TD Jakes phone call. This will be part of the official record alongside the audio. We are also requesting the court's attention for the next exhibit, an internal memo from Mr. Combs, legal consultant, referencing terms like spiritual firewall and divine handler. These terms emerged within 2 days of that conversation." The judge nodded. "Submit it." The screen lit up, displaying the document. Subject: Crisis Protocol, Spiritual Firewall Strategy. Dated August 11th, 2022. From Redacted Legal Advisor, Combs Enterprises. 2. Executive Risk Team. Following this week's counsel with J. Combs, the directive is to maintain minimal direct response. Messaging will be filtered through spiritual intermediaries and aligned influencers. J will provide theological framing in case faith communities question actions. Emphasize themes of forgiveness, redemption, and persecution. Another wave of gasps as the prosecutor pointed to the key phrases. Spiritual intermediaries. Theological framing. This memo isn't about public relations. It's about using faith as a shield not to protect the innocent, but to manipulate. Her voice rose. In TD Jakes, he wasn't just on the phone. His influence is in this very strategy. The defense stood abruptly. Objection. No proof Bishop Jakes saw or approved this memo. Your Honor, the prosecutor replied calmly, we're not claiming he wrote it. We're showing influence. The phrases match the leaked audio. Spiritual firewall, divine handling, stay aligned. These aren't coincidences. They're strategies discussed with a man Diddy called his spiritual architect. The judge overruled, not authorship influence. The next slide showed handwritten notes from an assistant's notebook seized in the raid. Call Jakes. Circles are nervous. Word on loyalty plus containment. Use scripture. Now the room went silent again. This wasn't inference anymore. This was a paper trail. Jennifer Lopez sat in the gallery, lips pressed tightly, eyes sharp. She had testified about her past with Diddy, but even she seemed unaware of the spiritual armor he wore. The prosecutor approached the jury. You heard the call? You read the memo? Now you've seen the notes. This wasn't just about hiding actions. It was about constructing a system where truth had no place, where power wore the robes of righteousness, where victims weren't silenced by Diddy, but by pastors, bishops, and shepherds. Diddy turned to his attorney, whispered something, and his lawyer scribbled furiously. The courtroom now felt like it was witnessing collapse. The judge broke the tension. This court acknowledges the spiritual memo. Private notes as supporting documentation to the obstruction charge under review. As the room recessed, no one moved. The silence was thick. Something sacred had been twisted and turned into a defense mechanism. What once felt like spiritual strength was now part of the prosecution's case. A reckoning had begun. The prosecutor's methodical display had stripped every layer of Diddy's defenses. But what lingered wasn't just what he did, was who aided him. The very language of healing had been corrupted into control. As court resumed, the judge looked older, not just from fatigue, but from what he was witnessing, the erosion of spiritual trust. The prosecutor stood, holding another folder thin, but damning. This wasn't new evidence. It was confirmation. Your Honor, she addressed the jury. We now present testimony from an individual who worked directly under Bishop TD Jakes. His identity is protected, but his statement is signed, verified, and supported by digital records. She opened the folder. From 2017 to 2022, I worked under Bishop TD Jakes. My role involved managing off-the-record conversations, script appearances, and filtering sensitive communications from key figures, including Diddy. We were regularly asked to craft spiritual language for statements, social posts, and private meetings. Messaging emphasized silence, loyalty, and perseverance under scrutiny. She looked up. This man wasn't speculating. He was scripting. Entire weekends were built around PR crises. When someone close to Diddy faced exposure, Bishop Jakes would be briefed. He'd preach messages about loyalty, storms, and divine distractions, always within 72 hours of headlines. A chart appeared on the screen: sermons versus scandals timeline crossmatch. Left column, June 2018. Assault at Diddy's NYC party. November 2019, footage leaked from Diddy's estate. March 2022, whistleblower reports to FBI. Right column, sermons titled Brotherhood in the Fire. The enemy hates alignment, all delivered within days of those events. Gasps turned to grief. This was no coincidence. It was coordinated. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecutor declared, this wasn't spiritual comfort. This was narrative control, emotional conditioning. This message is not to guide believers, but to mislead them. She faced Diddy. He didn't just have attorneys. He had a pulpit. The judge asked, is there more? Yes, she continued reading. I remember one call where Bishop Jakes said, "We're not lying. We're just protecting the truth until the world can handle it." That moment came after the internal circulation of the Miami recordings. After murmurs about the East Wing began gaining momentum, Paris Jackson leaned in from the gallery, while Jennifer Lopez remained perfectly still. You could feel the air thicken with realization this wasn't just about one man's actions, but the entire web of enablers that shielded him. And the most impenetrable defense wasn't wealth. It was a belief. The prosecutor's voice dipped lower. The witness also provided confidential records emails between staff coordinating public messaging, encrypted spiritual calls designed for damage control, and a sheet labeled Emergency Alignment Protocols. She held it up. Step 1. Assess the threat. Step 2. Alert Jake. Step 3. Construct the narrative. Step 4. Reinforce Diddy's divine image. Step 5. Drown out dissent and magnify the mission. The judge leaned back, visibly disturbed. The prosecutor ended with a near whisper. This case was not only about Diddy's misdeeds. It was about how he managed to commit them for so long, aided by someone expected to represent God but who chose instead to script for a tyrant. The session ended without applause, anger, or answers, just a haunting clarity. What was once viewed as divine had been weaponized as a mask. And beneath it all stood a man with a microphone, smothering truth under verses. The gavel hadn't officially landed, but the courtroom already felt like a sanctuary stripped of its saints. Every day had chipped away at illusion, but today the slow revelation of faith's betrayal pierced deeper. Because while crime outrages, spiritual deceit desecrates trust. As the day's final session began, the prosecutor returned with a file no one expected. Your Honor, we are submitting an exclusive audio file, provided anonymously by a former employee within Bishop TD Jakes' executive team. The file, recorded in late 2022, just after Diddy's investigations emerged, was a private voicemail from Bishop Jakes to a top unnamed contact at Combs Enterprises. The judge gave a somber nod, admitted. The lights dimmed, and the recording played. Sean, I know it feels like the world is tilting beneath your feet, the voice said, calm and composed. But we both know storms don't break the chosen, they expose the envious. His tone carefully measured. The story will bend our way if we control the pulpit. Let them talk, we'll talk louder through the believers, through the framing. Remember, truth rarely shouts, but redemption that can be orchestrated. Audible gasps filled the courtroom. The voice continued. I'll write the Sunday script. You just lay low. Let them speculate. But never let them forget men stumble. But the anointed always rise. I've already made the calls in Atlanta. The circle remains whole. The silence afterward was oppressive. TD Jakes wasn't offering spiritual support. He was drafting a crisis manual. The prosecutor allowed the silence to linger before speaking. This was not spiritual guidance. It was strategic planning. A blueprint from a sacred institution, not to heal, but to shield the powerful. She turned to Diddy. From the start, he engineered secrecy covert gatherings, filtered narratives, anonymous attendees, but he never imagined the guiding voice behind the curtain would end up on tape. Diddy remained motionless, no expression. No denial, because the voice he leaned on for credibility had just been exposed. And what once protected him with reverence now stood condemned alongside him. The prosecutors stepped toward the jury. This isn't solely about criminal acts. It's about a man who ruled over a kingdom of silence, aided by the trusted voices meant to call him out. TD Jakes wasn't just a bystander. He was the bridge between public virtue and private vice. She raised the transcript. This voicemail confirms it. And with that, we can end the debate. Faith was not only misused, it became a weapon. And now, finally, those who hid behind it must face what they did beneath it. The judge shut the folder. Court adjourned until closing arguments. Yet no one stood quickly. The gallery didn't feel like spectators anymore. They felt like mourners. Today, it wasn't Diddy who shocked them. It was the voice once trusted to lead them in prayer, now caught guiding the guilty through darkness. Blessing the silence that destroyed lives, the next session began under a silence too thick for words. It wasn't just the usual courtroom tension, it was grief. Not grief for Diddy. His downfall had become inevitable once the truth began leaking. This was deeper a mourning for something sacred. Those in the courtroom were now facing a betrayal that extended far beyond legal matters. This had desecrated something spiritual. Sermons, once seen as untouchable, had been used as camouflage. The judge entered, flanked by extra security. This final evidentiary session was sealed, press restricted. Everyone knew what that meant. What was about to unfold would change more than the outcome of this case. The prosecutor approached, holding a final exhibit, an email thread printed. On official stock, no audio, no video, just damning language, Your Honor. We now submit internal communications between a known financial advisor to Bishop TD Jakes and a third-party risk management firm tied to Combs Enterprises. The judge gestured for her to continue. These emails detail more than PR spin. They discuss financial repositioning, rebranding donation campaigns, and media strategies anticipating future fallout. She displayed the first email on the screen. Subject: Phase 2 Containment. Faith Layering Initiative. From Redacted Financial Advisor, Potter's House, to Redacted Reputation Team, Combs Enterprises. Date: October 5th, 2022. We recommend initiating the brand purity reset. Bishop J. To deliver a wilderness-themed Sunday message. Launch a donation. Campaign under the banner of healing. Reframe headlines as persecution. Align Haley B. narrative with darkness language. If she resists, deploy a reconciliation theology approach. The courtroom froze. The prosecutor turned to the screen. This isn't spiritual guidance. This is religious language retooled as PR church pews turned into shields. She moved to the next email. Subject: Payout Optics. Spiritual Endorsement. Buffer. From Redacted Risk Team. To Redacted Jake's Office. Date: October 7th, 2022. Suggest Bishop offer public quote, "Sometimes the price of obedience is being misunderstood by man but honored by God. If timed well, it'll calm mid-tier donors and cast Sean as a job-like figure." Someone in the audience sobbed. No one interrupted, because these weren't just memos, they were marching orders. Pre-scripted redemption, crisis playbooks masquerading as divine counsel. The prosecutor's voice quieted. These communications, Your Honor, predate the public outcry. Before Haley Bieber spoke, before the raids, they prepared to lie before questions were even asked. She faced the jury. You've heard the recordings, you've seen the messaging strategy, now you've read the plan to hijack the language of salvation and wield it to defend the architects of harm. She shut the folder. This isn't a curtain drop, it's a curtain fire. Diddy remained slumped, his lawyers silent. The facade finally obliterated, not just of his innocence, no, but of the elaborate system built to guard it using faith, power, and polished lies. The gavel hit once. This court accepts the communications as evidence of deliberate narrative manipulation via religious institutions and non-profit influence. And with that, the air released not in peace, but in fatigue. Because now, everyone had seen the manual how sin was cloaked in Scripture, how fear was branded as divine purpose, and how a man who preached healing had engineered a shelter. For harm, by the time the court resumed, a storm had blanketed the city in thunder. It mirrored the mood inside, unresolved, trembling. The benches were packed. No one whispered, no one checked phones. They all sensed what was about to come. The judge reappeared, robed heavier not in fabric, but in burden. His gaze swept the room. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was the disintegration of a cultural, spiritual institution. The prosecutor rose, not holding screens. No papers this time. Only her hands. Your Honor, this final piece of evidence doesn't require video or audio. It's a statement, a confession, but not from the defendant, and not from any witness we've heard before. The gallery leaned forward. This is from someone within the circle, a handwritten letter dated 1 week ago. Authenticated, sealed, and submitted voluntarily by someone identified only as J.H., a former assistant and mentee of Bishop Jakes. She stepped forward. With the court's permission, I'll read it now. The judge nodded once. She unfolded the paper and read aloud. To whom it may concern, I worked for Bishop Jakes from 2019 through early 2023. I was young, eager, seeking purpose. I believed I was in service to God, but in time, I learned I was serving a man, one who knew what Sean Combs was doing and helped cover it up. I saw the memos. I delivered burner phones. I assisted in shaping messages that weren't meant to heal but to conceal. I watched sermons built around crises, tailored not to comfort but to distract. I wasn't allowed to ask why. It was called strategic ministry. I sat in rooms where Diddy joked while survivors suffered. I watched the bishop embrace men who paid for blessings in public and protection in private. I deleted the footage. I spun betrayal into testing. This wasn't ministry, it was ego. It was an empire, and I stayed. Too long. Too silent. I believed questioning was disloyalty. I believed silence was duty. But I'm writing this now because truth is louder than fear. Because survivors deserve more than our silence. Because redemption without responsibility is just a brand reset. I know what I did. I know who I shielded. But today, I choose to protect the truth. The courtroom didn't erupt. Quietly, slowly, a shared grief over the realization that those assigned to protect the broken were the ones deepening the wounds. The prosecutor continued softly. This isn't just one person's guilt. This is collective pain. This confirms the pulpit wasn't just silent, it was used as cover. Not to heal, but to hide. She folded the letter. We're not here to try faith. We're here to confront the man who used it as a fortress and the one who reinforced it with holy language and corrupt purpose.
Ow.
She turned to the jury. Each layer of this trial revealed the same core. Diddy didn't act alone. He had builders, protectors, pastors, but now, finally, the silence has been broken. The judge whispered, "Court will recess until final arguments tomorrow." No one stood not because they couldn't, but because they now carried the weight of what they'd just heard. The letter bore no name, no photo, but its voice thundered louder than every excuse from the defense. A voice from within, the kind that finally chose light over shadows, justice over legacy. And just like that, the trial concluded. Yet no one rose. No one applauded. Not a single breath was released. Because what had been shattered wasn't just dramatic, it was sacred. Faith had been broken, influence exposed, power yanked from its hiding place and made to answer.
Ow.
Diddy sat like a ghost of the man who once walked in, face empty, empire erased. And in living rooms across the globe, where his music once echoed or Bishop Jakes' sermons played on peaceful Sundays, there now lingered a silence, not born of confusion, but of understanding. Because at last, truth had spoken louder than the image. As the courtroom emptied, heads low and hearts heavy, they weren't just exiting a space, they were walking out of the ashes of a legacy. Off a stage where the voice once most revered now stood alongside the one most feared, not as preacher and transgressor, but as joint creators of a deafening silence.